All right, now let's talk about the cops. A couple stories here on the qualified immunity, and this is the principle, of course, that largely allows state employees, not just police officers, but prosecutors, social workers, judges, etc., to violate the law. Typically, police officers either killing people, conducting illegal searches, stuff like that, things that are clearly constitutional violations, but they get away with claiming this principle of qualified immunity, or like prosecutors that they take part in like fabricating a case or something like that, they cry qualified immunity. Same thing with social workers who make things up. And so two recent cases, one handled by the Third Circuit Court, and the officers who are seeking qualified immunity are alleged to have hid evidence that would have cleared a man falsely accused of murder, and they, along with the prosecutor, kept that information from the imprisoned man for 25 years. And so, this is hiding exculpatory evidence. We'll talk about this a little bit more later on in the show, but hiding that is something that in the past prosecutors have hid behind the principle of qualified immunity to get away with, right? So you got a witness or something like that. You don't test other evidence. You don't talk to other witnesses. Things like that happen, and that may not actually get you violated and caught up in with the qualified immunity. You may get granted qualified immunity still with that, but I guess in cases where you actually hide information that is exculpatory, you will not get qualified immunity, and I guess you could face civil lawsuits, from the families of the people, or the people who had their lives. This guy spent a quarter of a century in jail for a crime he didn't commit, and these people knew he wasn't guilty, and yet decided anyways not to share that information with him. Then you also have the 10th Circuit Court deciding on the case Marisa Tugel, who was a caseworker in the Colorado Department of Human Services. And while investigating a suspected child abuse after the death of a 2-year-old child, she fabricated a story and a confession that led to Crystal O'Connell to being imprisoned for child abuse. And so the story of what happened was, I guess, O'Connell had her kid in the care of another person who tripped and fell, and that caused brain injuries that eventually led to the child's death. O'Connell, I guess, stuck with that story, but Miss Tugel fabricated a confession saying that it was a case of abuse, and I think the child was like shook or hit or something like that, and O'Connell went to jail. And then Miss Tugel asserted that she would have qualified immunity because there was a no prior case law that would have made her aware that fabricating a confession and handing it over to police to be used in prosecution was a violation of that person's rights, which is of course absurd. And so these are kind of easy cases for people to lose qualified immunity, but it's a really important principle to talk about. And so these are real wins against it here, even though it seems like, yeah, it should be obvious. It isn't always. The city of Baltimore will pay out $8 million to the family of Malcolm J. Bryant, who was wrongly imprisoned for 37 years. He did get out of jail before he died, but then he died a few months later. And so Bryant was convicted of the murder of Tony Bullock in 1998. And what it seems like is there was some tampering with the witness, this young girl's friend, who I'm sure was also very young, to get her to say that Bryant was the killer. And then they ignored other evidence, and so they didn't test DNA evidence. And then there was another witness who had a conflicting story who they kind of left out and didn't really talk about. And so eventually the Innocence Project got their hands on some fingernail evidence, and then some the evidence of the shirt and other DNA, and it was clear that it was not Mr. Bryant's DNA on her shirt, and that was enough to get the conviction thrown out. And I guess the prosecutor didn't seek another one. And so, really a shame that this guy has spent his whole life in prison for a murder that he did not commit. I guess that his legacy will get something from this, maybe a little bit of restitution, a small amount of justice that can now be handed out. But this is the problem with the U.S. Justice system, is that it's just injustice all over the place. Another similar case, this is Willie Stoats, spent 37 years behind prison for a murder there's no reason to assume he committed, I guess. And he does have an alibi for, so it does seem like he's probably innocent of this. This is in Philadelphia. And what happened was police officers, and I'm not sure prosecutors were involved or not, got a guy, lined him up as witness. This guy is going to go down big for a whole bunch of things that he actually did, but they want to get Stoats convicted on a different murder. And so they get this guy, and they allow his girlfriend to come visit him in prison and have sex with him. They tell him that he's only going to go to prison for 2, 5, maybe 7 years at the most, even though he's committed some pretty serious crimes. And they also give him condoms and bring him other women, so assuming prostitutes, but I mean, I guess I don't know under what circumstances these women were hopefully consenting in some way to have sex with the witness here. And so, that's bad enough that this guy is convicted off of that kind of testimony. However, it came out actually, and the man's name, I believe, is Franklin Lee. What was the name of the witness who got the sets and everything like that, that he actually was convicted of perjury for that testimony. And so he ends up going to jail for perjury on that, but they don't let Mr. Stoats out of jail or even inform him of that. And so once the judge, I guess a judge finds out and it gets in front of a judge, this actually does lead to Mr. Stoats getting out of jail. I'm guessing that the Philadelphia prosecutor is not going to launch a new case against Mr. Stoats, but I don't think that this was dismissed with perjury or perjury or something, and so it will it can possibly be brought back up, and I think they have about 140 days that they could do that for. On a few shows ago, I talked about this investigation by Customs and Border Protection agent Jeffrey Rambo. Mistakenly on that show, and correct myself here, I called it Operation Whistling Pig. It's just Whistle Pig. And there's a big expose on it in Yahoo News. If you want to go back, listen to that episode and check out that Yahoo piece. But just to follow up, they are launching an investigation. It's an internal investigation, so the Department of Homeland Inspector General's office is overseeing it. We shouldn't expect too much truth to come out, but an internal investigation will be had into the Counter Network Division, which is where Jeffrey Rambo worked. Last story on the cops today is that the Bureau of Prisons head, Michael Caravaggio, will be resigning. His tenure has been an absolute mess, and I talked about on the show not that long ago how there's important parts of the First Step Act that could get people out of prison through different kinds of programs that reduce recidivism that haven't been put in place because of the way Bureau of Prisons is negotiating a labor dispute.